It was only 50 years ago, but it was a world away, in the land of the Swazi people, a proud and ancient tribe living as they had for generations in the mountains and hills that frame the African bushveld. The Swazi lived a simple life, but it was subject to disease, hunger, and the witch doctors, who used spiritual power to cure and to curse. One young man from Cape Town, South Africa, Paul Van Zyl, was called to travel into the heart of the bush to bring light and life to people who had never heard the gospel of Jesus. And so he and his young wife Ellie began their ministry.
Just over 1,000 Swazi people living on top of that mountain, very, very primitive, much more primitive than the rest of the population, wearing mostly loincloth. And we started conducting services. We were staying in a tent at that time and building a log cabin. But we started conducting services in the open air. Myself, coming from Cape Town, I could speak only about 2 or 3 words in the Swazi language. So there was no way that I could communicate with the people. I had to learn the language from the people as we worked daily.
But just as the fruit of their efforts was about to ripen, a season of spiritual storms swept through their lives. The leader of the local tribe and his council were convinced that the Van Zyls had come to destroy their way of life and take their children into the white man's world. They posted guards between the village and the little tent where Paul and Ellie lived and had their church meetings.
I went there to preach the gospel, and suddenly I was stopped. And so it leaves a great vacuum in your life. You go to bed at night knowing that you did not accomplish anything. You worked in the garden that day, you cleared the ground, you planted bananas, you planted pineapples, you started developing because you've got no money to do any construction, you've got no vehicle to do the job in, but at least you're doing something every day. But the main object was in the evenings to have that service, and that was taken away. That was a very, very difficult time for us. Ellie kept on praying and said and saying, and that's the way she still is today, that there's a reason behind this, and the Lord will solve the problem himself. Don't be impatient. Your problem is you're too impatient, and the Lord is now teaching you patience. And I was patient for 5 months, and then I decided, well, that's it.
In a desperate state of mind, with frustration mounting over his future as a missionary, Paul began the long walk up the path to the village with his trusted friend and translator, Armand.
We walked single file. He walked some distance behind me, and I was chatting to him in Afrikaans. And now and again he would answer me, but by the time I got up to the gate, I did not hear any answer from him anymore. And I turned around and looked for him, and he was gone. He just slipped off into the long grass and lay down. I called his name and I shouted for him, and he just kept quiet, and he just left me standing there. And I only had 2 choices. I had to go back home and forget about the whole thing and pack and go back to the Republic of South Africa, or I had to go in there and face the music. I marched into that circle, and they were greatly surprised to see me there. I began speaking in Afrikaans, and I told them that I came to this place, and I came very far. I come from Cape Town, which is very, very far from this place. And that's why I do not understand or speak their language. I said, but I came for a reason. And I began explaining to them why they all sat there and just looked at me. And suddenly I realized that the expression on their faces began to change, because I heard myself thinking in my own language and speaking in my own language, but there was a different sound that came out of my mouth. There was a language that was coming out of my mouth that I could not speak. I could not identify it. But it sounded to me like I was speaking in Swazi. Whatever was happening, I couldn't stop. I must just go on right now. And I explained to them, I said, we did not come to change your customs. We did not come to teach your children how to sleep on a bed or eat with knives or forks. We came to bring you the gospel and to teach the children to respect you, the elders, and to love you and to love God. That's the reason why we came. All we want is for them to come to the services and enjoy what we have brought, which is much better than they have. And at that stage, Amunum Lambo came walking up towards me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him coming up. And he came and he stood next to me and he began speaking. And he told the chief, this man that is now speaking to you cannot speak your language. And the chief responded by saying, but this man is a liar. He said, how come? Where does he get this knowledge to come here into this circle and speak to us in that language? And then Amon turned around and I saw the tears streaming over his eyes and he said it wasn't him speaking. It was God speaking to you. And then the old chief hung his head and he said, I made a mistake. So I misjudged this church, I misjudged this man, and the gates will be open for us from today. We will never close it again.
Through the decades, Paul and Ellie continued their powerful ministry, building dozens of churches, training hundreds of ministers. Ellie became a midwife and delivered over 3,000 babies without losing one child. Paul taught himself medicine and dentistry to further care for the needs of the people of the bush, from Swaziland up into the high country of the Pedi people. Paul and Ellie have now created New Hope Ministries in Barberton, South Africa, near the place they began their ministry. Today they face new challenges, seemingly impossible to overcome. The grim reality of an Africa ravaged by the AIDS virus. Thousands upon thousands of orphaned children and dying people wait in vain for help from an overburdened system of welfare in the nation. So Paul and Ellie do what they have always done. They meet the needs.
Every day we feed the children. Our motto is never to send anybody away without food. If they're farther away, we give them a little something to take with them also, but we feed every child that comes there that needs to be fed.
We aim to, while we are helping them, it's not the idea is only just to help the aged orphans or aged children, but to also bring them the gospel, teach them about Jesus Christ, and that's the main object. In the meantime, they cannot do that on an empty stomach, so we feed them.
Located in Tonga, near the Swazi and Mozambique border, this orphanage and child care center brings life and light to children whose lives were once hanging by the smallest thread of hope.
We already had this dream. We want to do this. We knew that it was a calling from God. We knew we were not youngsters anymore, but we felt that this is what the Lord wants us to do at this time. We want to help the orphans.
But the main thing is to get the gospel to these children. And they belong to the Lord, and they must remain the property of the Lord. That is our deepest desire and our deepest wish.
Paul and Ellie also teach young ministers and future missionaries in this unique training center on the New Hope Ministries compound. On the serene and beautiful grounds, there are paintings and sculptures that Paul has created over the years, and Ellie's gardens are filled with beautiful flowers and with vegetables. In South Africa, today, there is still new hope, because the Van Zyls have heard from the Lord and are faithful to Him and to His mission.